Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life.
Hey everybody, on this episode I've got a longtime friend of my wife and I's, Krystal Dunn. We've known her for years. Really good person, really good shooter, and just a generally all-around interesting individual. So I think everybody's going to enjoy this class. Krystal, why don't you let everybody know a little bit about your background and kind of where you're at and what you do?
For sure. Well, thanks, Matt. It's so good to chat with you again. I know we're just doing our pre-chat. I'm like, I miss you guys. In fact, right behind me, you got me the very first bottle that I ever tried of Blanton's.
Oh, really? That's right.
It's been when I can find it, it's a staple in the house ever since. So that's a little bit about my bourbon tastes. Otherwise, yes, USPSA competitor, ambassador for some different companies, especially federal. Love working with them. Been doing that for a long time. I also own a brow and skincare salon. And then I actually have gotten quite a bit into training for new shooters, women, concealed carry, and just kind of helping to create a lot of educational content for people who want to get into guns and are intimidated, don't know where to start.
So, and a side note, you did my wife's brows.
I did.
So you did her permanent makeup tattoos on her brows. So I can vouch for her work there. So if you're in her neck of the woods and you need that, probably not the thing my typical listener is looking for, but there's got to be somebody on the show that is. So
exactly.
Yep. How did you get into competitive shooting? Because you've been doing that for a while. Because I remember the first time I met you was at a major. It wasn't at the Nationals you were at in Utah that we talked. It was before that. Was it
that fun Texas shoot that they don't do anymore? Double tap?
No, it wasn't double tap. It was something up in the Midwest. It was
maybe Wisconsin.
Was it in Indiana? Maybe
could have been. That's when I was real ambitious and I traveled the country shooting a lot.
yeah, because we talked throughout the match, and then everybody was hanging out at Texas Roadhouse of all places.
We did. Yeah.
Remember, because Eric Camps got drunk and rode their bull that was in the corner.
Yes, I did. How could I forget that? You're so
well,
right.
I don't know if Eric was drunk. He's a great buddy of mine. He's kind of naturally that way, whether he's sober or not. So it could have been either way with Eric, actually.
That's what makes a good time.
Yeah, no. And then we've known each other ever since then, like at different matches and stuff and talking and. You know, and you and Angela really hit it off, and we spent some time hanging out with you up in Minnesota when we still lived in the frozen Midwest.
Mm-hmm. So I'm still there right now, but I go between here and North Carolina. But yeah. And you guys were back up in frozen Chicago, and before you got smart and made it out to Texas.
You know, it's funny because when I go back up there to teach, because usually I go up there in March, right? And sometimes in March it's pretty cold still in Chicago.
Oh God, yeah.
And I'll walk out of the airport and I'll be like, my face hurts. Why did I ever live somewhere where the air makes my face hurt?
Mm-hmm. Or when you breathe in and you're like, it's like frozen in my nostrils. That's a new experience.
Or trying to go for a run in the wintertime up there it actually, I think is bad for your health. I think they've said like the air is so cold that it can mess with your lungs.
Well, they give you those warnings. It's like, don't be outside more than 10 minutes. You'll get frostbite. And you're like, well, that's when you know it's serious.
When I was on SWAT up there, like all the uniform rules went out the window when we would have a job in the wintertime. Like guys would be wearing like their hunting parkas and, you know, overalls and, you know, everything possible not to die out there.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd be out on the perimeter for like 15 minutes, then you'd be back in the command van warming up for 30. And you had to rotate. Guys would literally get frostbite if you didn't do that. You'd have to rotate it like that.
It's real deal.
Of course, now, you know, I'm down here and now it's 110 degrees in the summertime. So it's one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
But I'll take this one though, I think.
Yeah, I just got back from Dallas on Sunday. I was down there for a turning point thing. I do obviously that as well, but it was steamy down there, and my girlfriends were like, "Yeah, that's the only thing. Texas in the summer heat is intense."
No, it is, and it's unless you're in West Texas, it's not a dry heat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was sticky.
So, all right, we got to get back to the shooting because that's what people tuned in for. So, what made you start the competition?
Yeah. So that's a funny story. If you and I have never talked about that before, I was kind of early 20s, had just gone through a breakup, and I was doing my find myself thing. And I started doing all kinds of random things. I took woodworking classes, breakdancing, upholstery. I was doing like the most random things in the world. I thought it was just like a good kind of healthy project to do. And my dad was like, "Have you ever thought about competition shooting?" And this is like, you could find it on YouTube, but like Instagram wasn't real big back then. And so when he asked me about that, I was like, never heard of her. And so I looked it up and saw people running around. I'm like, that looks like way more fun than running with scissors. I need to do that. So I found a guy, God bless his heart, who gave me a basic pistol intro class for competition specifically. So like, holster work and the commands and all that. An older gentleman that have you ever heard of Filster holsters, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. So husband and wife team. The wife, Sarah, good friend of mine, her and I did this together. So it was both of us started together before they created the Enigma and everything else. And this gentleman who was giving us this class, he had a heart attack on the range before. He was a much older guy. So he sat in the AC while her and I loaded mags. And then, of course, his recommendation, we went to IDPA. So we had the fishing vest, the whole 9 yards. We were good to go. And then I think after like maybe 2 matches, some younger person snagged us and was like, "You need to check out USPSA." And so got into it and been doing it ever since. That was 2013.
It's a little bit of time ago. That was before I started shooting matches.
Yeah, been in it for a minute.
So, and how does your training look? Like, what do you typically do, especially as you're getting into like the competition season or you have a big match coming up? Because I know you juggle a lot of irons. You have a lot of irons in the fire. You've got a bunch of things in the air at the same time. So how do you manage that?
Yeah. So, it's kind of funny because I think that you can probably attest to this a little bit too. I think the average competition shooter gets into it and they're like, "Oh my God, I love this." And usually when you first get into it, you suck for the average person, right? And so you see this really big ramp up when you start putting work into it in the beginning, and you're trying to, a lot of people, they try to like class up. That's their big thing, right? Since being in it a while now, I usually try to have people look at other markers, simply because I feel like when you go to a match, if you're just focused on winning your category, your class or something like that, it's really dependent on who else is there. Where I try to tell people like, "Hey, why don't you look at trying to set like, just shoot a clean match, or try to shoot no more than like 15% Charlie, or, and give them different metrics to focus on." But of course, that's not how it goes in the beginning. So super ambitious, traveled all around, and I was training a ton and putting a lot of work into it. And then you start to see those results. As you know, once you get to a certain point, you kind of get to that point of diminishing returns, and it gets a little bit, harder to want to keep that same passion. And especially I've been in it for, over 10 years now. Now I would say I go through seasons where, I got to a certain point. I had one season where like I was doing really well. I won my class at several matches. I won high lady at most of the majors I went and shot when I was back shooting limited, and really, really enjoyed it. And then you kind of realize like it is a lot of work. And so some seasons I tell people it's really okay if you are super passionate and you're putting everything you can into it from a competition side, and you're working really, really hard at it. And then there may be some seasons where this summer you have other things. You've got your family, you've got kids, you've got their activities, you've got different things like that. I'm like, and that is totally okay. But I would tell people that it's so different for your average competition recreational shooter versus maybe I'm gonna guess a fair amount of your listeners that shooting is part of their job. It like people's lives, their own or other people depend on it. Right. And so I think that there's two different standpoints. And so I kind of tell people like, you really have to base your training on what are your obligations, what are your goals, and what's your balance and what's your priority that season. Right. So I have this season, I'm enjoying it again. I'm back out on the range training again. Last year was really crazy. I had a lot of stuff going on with work. This season, I'm enjoying teaching and, training with my own shooting. You always learn more, when you teach other people that you can take back in your own training and vice versa. So it kind of changes every year.
And you brought up an interesting point too. and it kind of applies in a different way, both to civilians, like you were talking about, I think, and also like military, law enforcement, people that carry a gun for a living. Like shooting is not the only skill we had to be good at.
Right.
There was a huge number of things we had to be really good at. And shooting is absolutely vital and it's important, but one of the reasons why competition shooters shoot better than SWAT guys or SF guys typically is because it's the only thing they're worried about.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not even worried about so much. I mean, a lot of them carry a gun, and I don't want to talk them down either. That's not my point. I'm not being critical of competition shooters. But even if they carry a gun and they're into the defensive side as well, it's usually not as much of a priority for them as the pure performance in the matches, right?
Yeah.
Whereas even if you take just the shooting piece, it is different for an SF guy or a SWAT guy. Like they have to approach it. Yes, performance is performance, and they should be training more like a competitor. And we've seen a lot of improvements in that respect in the last few years, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing at all. But they've still got to work on it in a more of a tactical setting. They've still got to work on it in their CQB. They've still got to work on it in this variety of ways that the competition shooter doesn't really have to the same way.
Yeah.
You know? And then when you add in infill, you add in breaching, you add in all the technology you need to be good at, you add in all the fitness requirements, you add in, depending on the team you're on, it could be mountain climbing, or it could be scuba diving, or it could be all these other things that take a lot of time to be good at too. And there's only so much training time available. And like one of the things I tell my people that are usually a little more, like a lot of them are competitors, but they're more defensive minded,
Yeah.
is that it's okay to figure out how good you think you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to chase the dragon. You don't have to see how far the rabbit hole goes unless you want to. And if you want to, that's cool too. But like the average SWAT or SF guy is probably a low B class shooter, maybe high A. And they're still, and there's still
a lot of B class. Like a lot of them are like solid, but like I've seen a lot of starting.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. Like it's not, they're not M's and GMs, right? And I'm factoring in the average between SWAT and SF because the average in SF is higher than the average in SWAT, right?
Yeah.
So, but you're looking at, a good SF shooter is a B class shooter, and you take 12 B class shooters who can do all that other stuff really well, and you have them go through a building hunting you. It's not a good day. Like, it's.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point too. So it's funny. I was talking to somebody not that long ago because I've definitely had an evolution in how I thought about training and how I thought about competition shooting versus really truly that personal defense aspect. And I was talking to Matt Hopkins about it, and I asked him, I kind of was asking a bunch of competition shooters, I'm like, do you carry? And a lot of them was like, no. And I asked Matt that, and I said, why do you think so many competition shooters don't carry? He goes, I think because a lot of competition shooters are so focused on the game, and they see it as a tool to get better at that game, kind of circling back and touching on what you said, versus, being part of a lifestyle and really being that safety and defensive minded. And I was definitely one of those people for a long time where like my gun was like to be better at matches and better at shooting. And I want a big, huge, giant, heavy gun that's gonna, I can ride like a Cadillac through the stages. I love that. And then I would say, obviously I live in Minnesota, and 2020 happened in that summer. And Minnesota went from being a really fairly safe place to being absolutely bonkers and kind of scary. And that was when I really started to, and then I had a lot of other women approaching me at the salon, and like, at that time as a fire sale, everybody was like, I want a gun. And like, so I was just getting contacted by so many people. And that's when I got more interested in training women, but also it was when I started to think about my own safety in mind. And then even just having more, kind of sketchy experiences and things like that. I just had somebody in this approach me when I was leaving the salon yesterday to the point where I literally had to put my hand up and be like, stop, like you are close enough. What do you want? Because we have a liquor store not too far away. And so, just thinking from that side, I think it changed the way, like I actually train with small guns now. I hated shooting with small guns. They make better small guns now, calm small guns, your optics, everything, which is nice. But it definitely changed the way that I think a lot of people trained, and going back to your point, like having to prioritize, if now that's your job, one more layer on top of everything else to be proficient at.
And there's also like there's that concept that a lot of people in like sports psychology talk about, right? The whole level of participation.
Mm-hmm.
Like what is your level of participation able to be? What are your resources for this? How much time do you have? How much money do you have? How much can you put into it? And then I find a lot of people, the goals they have set for themselves aren't equivalent to the level of participation their life lets them do.
Yeah.
And that's just a recipe for frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've got to be, I mean, I hate to say realistic because I don't want to dissuade people from kind of shooting for the stars. You know what I mean? Like people should be ambitious in their goals. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you have to have some level of realism too. I mean, if you're working 80 hours a week and shooting is not part of your job, like I used to work 80 hours a week, but shooting was part of my job.
Right.
I could make it work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But say you're a guy that's, a businessman and you're working 60, 80 hours a week legitimately and shooting isn't part of your job.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to fit enough stuff in to be a GM probably. It's just probably not, unless you're amazingly talented.
Right. Well, and I always try to explain to people too, like you need to consider what you're going to get out of it. So your first thing is obviously talking to people about it's so true. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. Right. And at some point, like we talked about, the point of diminishing returns. Like once you get to that BAM, like you're going to have to put in a lot more work to get even just 2% better. So, that's part of it. But the other thing is a really perfect example. And, I don't want to call him out, but do you remember Alex Goot?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Phenomenal shooter. I loved watching his first person point of view videos because you're like, my eyes didn't even track that before you were done shooting that. And he put in the work and he won nationals. And I think he thought when he won nationals, it was going to change everything. And it changed nothing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I only use as an example because he is so phenomenal. So nothing against him, but he, like he stopped shooting after that, really.
Yeah.
And I think that's just an important cause because I really tell people that I'm like, also keep in mind that this entire thing is for your personal development. Like there is no big brand deal at the end. There is no, you're quitting your job. A lot of people don't understand, like I make a little bit of money in shooting, but it is from marketing. Like I have marketing things that I do. At the end of the day, I'm like, your reward for shooting well is a little piece of wood that you go home and probably it gets dusty somewhere in your basement, right? Like, and that's important for people to know when they go into this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of people, and I'm blanking on, there's a term that the sports shrinks use for that too. And I'm trying to remember what it is, because there's your level of participation, which is how much you're putting in.
Yeah.
And then I forget the term, but it's the reward you're getting.
Yeah.
And if the juice isn't worth the squeeze to you, you won't keep doing it.
Right. And you know what absolutely floors me. And I am so impressed by this because I also think, and maybe you experienced this after shooting for so long, like I said, you're so passionate. I was ambitious. I was going to every major I could go. I was every weekend and every weeknight in the summer. I'm shooting, right? Because I want to get better and I'm enjoying it. But like, how many years can you sustain that? You know what I mean? That's why I'm like, you'll have seasons on and off. I took a class with Donovan Moore and JJ Racaza, and I love JJ. And I ended up, him and I ended up taking a ride to the airport together. And I was talking to him about the evolution of his career because he's been in it for so long. He's one of the only people I have ever met that he still has a super big fire for competing, to where like now he's teaching and he's doing other things. And I was like, so, a lot of instructors, trainers find at some point that it makes more sense for them to prioritize teaching over shooting their own personal matches. You've already won nationals, you've won worlds, but like you got to pay the bills. And he's like, nah, I'll take a match over a class any day. I'm like, really? He's like, Krystal, I still have such a fire. I still want to win so bad. I'm like, even though you've won so many times, yes. And I was like, see, you are a true competitive person. Like that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, plus his life is set up to sustain that. Like there is a lot of reward for him in that, and he's got a wife who supports him wonderfully, and he's got the kids, and he's got, this family that really is behind him. And that's one thing, but it's another thing if you're the guy that might come in 5th or 10th at a major.
Yeah, you're so close.
And you're good.
Yeah.
You're a good shooter. But how long is someone like that? And I'm not judging anybody whether they decide to stay in the sport or not.
Right.
But if you can't break through past that, how much longer do you want to put in that huge, because it's a huge amount of work.
It is.
It's an insane amount of work.
It really
you
is.
know, and I mean, that's just like I talk to my like defensive shooters and I say that nobody can make this decision for you.
Yeah.
The only people I don't say that to are SF guys and SWAT guys, because sorry, you're never good enough. Right? Like, you know, if your job involves hostage rescue, you are never good enough. There's no way. Like you just got to keep getting as good as you can get with the amount of time you have to put into it.
Right. And see, I think that part is nice because it gives those guys another bit of motivation to where you're like, okay, this is a part of me being good at what I do and people depending on me. And I think that that's nice because it has that motivation. But yeah, if somebody continues to win world shoot 15 million times, it's like, at what point are you just like, I've done it. But like, if you still have that fire, like, kudos to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But like I said, think about the poor guy who's always the bridesmaid, but never the bride.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
yeah,
like
exactly. We know lots
and you really can't fault that person for eventually finding something else to put their effort into, or maybe shifting into a different role, like more of an instructional role, like you talked about, you know?
Absolutely.
And I think it's one of those things where I don't feel like I have the right, like I said, except for somebody who does it for a living. I'll die on that hill, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
But for someone who's doing it, like at a certain point, if you're doing this to defend yourself and your loved ones, you're probably good enough to handle anything but the most extreme outlier without devoting so much of your time to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think they said that the average C-class shooter is in the top 1% of gun owners in the world, as far as like shootings go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I completely believe that. And then, you know, factor in like think like what's an A class then? What's a master class? What's a GM?
Right.
You know, fractions of a percent out of the people in the human population. And then there's the other things that are important too for self-defense. You know, there's awareness, there's all this other stuff going on that. So this is a thorny subject, right? But I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, right? So I would like to think that I played some at least small role in the current popularity of competition shooting for law enforcement and military. Like I didn't play as big a role as some of the other instructors, but I think I played a role in it, right? And it's wonderful that things are headed that way. Like it's fantastic. But then I find that now people are making a different mistake, and I run into this all the time now. Yes, your pure shooting skill is probably the most important piece of the puzzle if you carry a gun for a living, for a shooting situation, right? But there's other pieces to that puzzle too, and they also matter. So if all you're doing is shooting matches, you're not thinking about, and it's kind of the flip side of how people used to go, well, shooting will get you killed in the street because tactics and mindset, which was nonsense, right? You know, competition shooting is not getting you killed in the street.
Yeah, I think people think that's like, we joke about that. It's like, no, people legitimately thought that, like, and said that not that long ago.
Now we have the anti-FUD error, which is just as true an error, which is all I have to do is be good at competition. And that's not really true either. It's not like, so like shooting. So, you know, I did a lot of martial arts, right? And I fought competitively and all that stuff, right? So shooting is like hitting the shooting USPSA. It's like hitting the heavy bag or hitting the speed bag or hitting the pads, right? It's vital. It's really important. It's how you sharpen your technique and you get those skills better, but it's not sparring.
Yeah.
It's not the fight. And I think now we've got people going too far and thinking that they don't have to actually do all the other stuff as well to be good at fighting with a gun. And both errors are still errors, right? They're both just like the old error of that'll get me killed in the street and I don't need to do that. And that was a huge error and it was a big mistake. But thinking that all I have to do is shoot like a competitor and I can kind of phone in everything else is just as big a mistake in the other direction. You need both, you know? And like I even tell civilians that want to be good at like defending themselves. Not to do it seriously, not to do it as a sport unless they feel like it, but to go play some airsoft, go play some paintball. Because no, it's not realistic, but at least it's got an opponent. Right? At least you're understanding kind of that dynamic. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's something I've been having a lot of conversations about your general, kind of civilian gun owner, new gunner, or just maybe like your husband's in it or and there's one in the house. I've been having a lot of conversations about this lately and kind of what you're talking about how the theories behind training has changed. But shoot, I feel like there is this mean girl culture that's kind of popped up when it's come to training. And I don't love it, right? Because I get the basis of it that there have been grifters that have been getting contracts in the past, right? And getting government contract and they're really they're out of their depth and they're taking money and they're not leaving people adequately prepared. And I totally understand why that's a problem. But I think the issue is and somebody else was just talking about this, is that you see all these people who are not that knowledgeable and they kind of see that sentiment growing in the training culture and then they kind of like join in on it. And it's like, but you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And you're like, yeah, F that guy. And you're like, why don't you just calm down a little bit and take a seat, just turn it down a bit. But the problem with that, I think, is that you have people who are very, very new to guns and it's not part of their career. And they are nervous to get into it because it's already an intimidating thing for them. And then they come into it and people are like, you need to it's like kind of the David Goggins, like in your face thing. Like, you train hard, get up and shoot every day. And it's just like, I don't think that is viable for everybody. And that's why I got all kinds of, heat when I posted a funny thing about can we stop telling girls to buy tiny guns? And my thing behind that
it's a horrible idea.
It's great. But here's the thing. There's no nuance on the internet. If it's for carry, a tiny gun is fine. But how many women do you know that actually do carry? Because I know a lot of women that own carry guns that don't actually carry them. So I was just kind of saying a medium to full size gun is a little bit more enjoyable to learn on and to shoot. So if she's going to carry, buy her a small gun in the future when she's ready to carry. But if she's telling you she just wants to learn and she's not going to carry it, maybe look at something else that fits her hand a little bit better. And people lost their minds.
Well, but I agree with you completely.
Right?
What I usually say is try to find a gun with the same platform in different sizes.
Right. Yeah.
And then you have a training gun and you have a carry gun.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even do that. Like in the summertime, I don't carry an XC in the summertime in Texas.
Right.
But I'll carry a C2.
Right. But I think go ahead.
And Angela doesn't carry a staccato P. It would be ridiculous. It would be like she had a tumor under the yoga tights. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But she'll carry her little single stack C. And it's the same gun. It's just a different size. And yes, it's harder to shoot, but if you can shoot the big one well, you can shoot the small one well enough.
Yeah. I love that. I think it was just, I don't know if people know, but the latest statistics are that the number one gun that's being sold right now, especially to women, are these subcompacts. But if you then compare that statistic with how many women actually carry, they don't mesh. So my thing that I'm hearing working with women is that they're going to the gun store and saying, hey, I want to learn how to shoot. I want a gun. And they're being sold this tiny gun. And either they're just not choosing to put the work in it, or they don't really enjoy shooting that gun, or they never had any intention of carrying it in the first place because they're just trying to learn. So I think that's where I was just trying to put that sentiment out there is if you ask any guy, what gun should a girl get? His first recommendation is a carry gun. And I'm like, well, why don't you see if she even has any intention of carrying first before you automatically recommend a carry gun? Maybe start with something else.
Well, and most of the really small guns aren't fun to shoot.
No, they're not.
I don't like shooting them, and I have hands the size of flippers. I mean, I am the missing link. I mean, you know this. You've known me for years. My thumbs don't oppose. This is not a human hand. Right? I'm an orangutan who manscapes. I am not a regular human being. So if I don't enjoy shooting them because they're snappy, I guarantee you brand new shooter who is far more petite than I am is not going to have fun shooting it.
Exactly. And I'm and if you're going to carry it, yes, get it and train with it. But if you're not, maybe start with something like you said, you're enjoying and you can learn on. So there's so many things about training right now that I see that this elite performance shooter, somebody that's part of their career and culture, that part of training is vastly improving and people are getting it and they're shooting competition. But I think that is bleeding into the new gun owner that's it's not part of their career. They're not going to go that hard, but they still need a higher level of quality education and training. And I feel like there's a gap there right now.
Well, and what's the first thing you need to ensure to make somebody keeps up with the training they need?
Well, so
make sure they enjoy it.
Yeah, make sure they enjoy it. Yeah, I was gonna say, for
Yeah.
me, it's that they enjoy it and that you give them reasons to understand why it's important. And a perfect example of that is that there are those trainers out there that are like, you never need to shoot past 7 yards. You never need to shoot past 10 yards. Right? We like know these people, they exist. And I'm like, this is terrible. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. So
yeah, well, I love the whole, you hear the mantra, 3 to 5 rounds, 3 to 5 seconds, 3 to 5 yards, right? You hear that all the time in defensive shooting. Mm-hmm. And yes, that is the median.
Right.
But if people never really heard of a bell curve and how it works, like just because that's the median doesn't mean that it might not be your day to get the Dickens incident where it's 40 yards in a food court, right?
Yes, 1,000,000%. Well, and I always tell, I try to, one thing I've noticed after taking several classes, because that's my big thing right now, is I've taken classes with several instructors. I've really been enjoying taking classes with people who are not in the competition side of things, so that I can kind of learn how they do things. But also I enjoy taking like just local education to see how good or bad it is, right? And learn from that. But if anything, a lot of times I feel like people take these classes and they go away from them and they don't have any homework and they still don't understand how to train, right?
Yeah.
They're like, we did this drill and we did this drill and then we did this drill. And then so I was AIing in a class and stuff. And some of the people, I just had to reinforce them. I'm like, do you understand what the point of this drill is? Like, do you understand what the objective is? And it's like, it's not just to hit the A zone. Like there's other things we're learning or diagnosing. And so I talk to people about who say that. They're like, well, don't most engagements happen inside like 7 yards? I'm like, well, sure. But like, if you are doing something at 7 yards and then you go out and you shoot it at 15, 20 yards and you're making something small, it's going to be amplified and magnified at that distance. So then you can see what you need to work on and what you need to correct. There's several reasons to go shoot out towards distance. Or like you said, you're in the Dickens thing in the 40 yards away. So there's so many different reasons.
Well, like one of my students sent me a message just last week saying that he'd gotten into shooting at work like 2 days after my class.
Wow.
And he made a shot from, he didn't tell me the exact distance. He said it was like between 40 and 50 yards.
Wow. Yeah.
Against a guy in a car. So, I mean, and that's like, that could be what you get. Like, you don't know. And yeah, as a civilian, it's a different mindset. You're not hunting the person, right? But suppose that guy's got one of your loved ones and it's not 40 yards, but it's far enough to make it a hard shot. Right.
Yes. And that's the big thing. If you're in your home where there isn't, you know what I mean? And they're close to somebody else, somebody between you and the exit, there's so many different things that the what ifs that actually can become a real possibility. So, but there's a big gap there right now. So like you said, I think you need to make sure that people enjoy it. And then I think you need to get people to understand the importance of it.
Yeah. Get them to buy in.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. That's important.
So I'm trying to decide between two different possible titles for this episode.
Okay.
One is going to be Mean Girls. And the other possibility is the internet has no nuance.
Yeah, please go with that one. Because it's the internet has no nuance. They don't allow for anything. Everything's binary. If you say one thing, you're attacking somebody else's idea. It's like, it's a big old black and white here and here. There's a lot of gray in between.
Yeah. Like, one of the things, and not about this, but about like technical things, like when I talk about different kinds of sight picture, different kinds of trigger press, or different paces of shooting, I always make sure to tell everybody that I've got these names for categories that I came up with, and other people have other names for categories, and they pretty much are congruent. They pretty much line up. Yeah. But none of these are toggle switches. They're all rheostats. They're all volume knobs, right? It's not this or this or this. Right. It's somewhere on the spectrum from this to this and all the things in between. Because I think people want simple technical solutions to complex, chaotic problems. Mm-hmm. And that's not how that really works. I mean, yes, the principles of your technique are very simple, which doesn't mean they're easy. Right? Simple. Right. Everybody thinks simple and easy are equivalent, and they're not. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
But yes, the techniques of shooting correctly are pretty simple. You line up the sights and you pull the trigger without disturbing the sights. But there's a whole lot of other stuff that winds up going on that makes it hard for you to do that.
Absolutely.
And looking for this like one size fits all solution is not, you have to have nuance. Like you said, the internet needs to learn nuance. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, the internet needs to learn nuance. It's 100% true. Well, it was so I got my concealed carry instructor certification recently, and the instructor was fantastic, great guy, but he was older, and he's from an older school of thought, and his shooting heroes were like John Farnham, who I don't think is with us anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
I think Farnham, did Farnham pass? I think he's still alive.
I don't know. I thought he had passed on.
I don't know. I'm gonna look at the Google machine because I honestly don't know.
Well, I hope because if not, I'm so sorry.
I'm sure he'll be okay. He's been around long enough not to be insulted. He's got pretty thick skin. Yeah, he'll be all right.
But I think he's like Vietnam like era. Yeah. And during that time, like great stuff. But I think that, and you would know better than I, right? But here's something that I've discussed with some people, that there is a lot of techniques that have become very popular in traditional everyday gun owner training that people are very married to, that came out of, the FBI Academy, for instance, when the amount of urban engagements was very low, right?
Yeah.
Versus 20 years of GWAT with a lot of urban engagements. And there's just better things and better techniques that have come out of that. And so when you talk about like, even just, the Weaver stance versus, squaring up to your target, different things like that. And it's just so funny and so hard when you work with somebody from an older mindset. Like I was in class and I was trying not to be the bad kid when something come up and I'm like, oh yeah, blah, 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 like never slap the trigger. I'm like, well, sometimes you can slap the trigger. You know what I mean? I'm like, there's so many things that, like I said, in the more elite parts of training, I think have become like, oh yeah, that's old news, but it's still very much prevalent in kind of your average gun owner, training. And so it's kind of funny that as techniques and as those things evolved, you're lucky that working with some of the guys that you work with, they're all open to that mindset. But it is very, very difficult sometimes to get other people to be open to those new ideas. And there's no nuance in it. They're just like, nope, it's not. And you're like, well, but there's situations.
So I have a couple thoughts on this.
Yeah.
That I want to share with you. One is, you're absolutely correct, of course. But then and I run into that all the time. Like there's things in class that if you say this, you're like excommunicado from my classes, like John Wick, right? If you ever tell me slow is smooth and smooth is fast, if you ever tell me slow down and get your hits, right? Yeah. Like you're done. Just leave now. But the other one is that I'm honestly astonished at how little we pay attention to the history of pistol craft.
Yeah.
Like I was teaching a group just last week, law enforcement group, and great guys, phenomenal guys, really motivated, really good attitude, but only 2 of them knew who Jeff Cooper was.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you not, like, how are you into shooting and you don't know who Jeff Cooper was?
At least I've heard. Yeah.
And I'm like, those little 4 rules of firearm safety, like those things. Yeah. Or the El Presidente drill, or the color codes of awareness, or, so many things. And not that, we've come so far since then. But kind of to your point, we've come so far because of people like him. We've stood on their shoulders and kept improving. Like whenever I do bad at a match and I want to feel better about myself, I get on YouTube and I'll pull up like IPSC Nationals from like 1993.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, I could have been somebody, right? Because we've come so far since then. But that doesn't mean that they weren't phenomenal, because they came up with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. I was at a match not that long ago, and this all honestly, oh my God, I'm like, you guys, I'm forever 29. Like, what the hell? Like, but I've been in shooting for so long that I said something about like, all right, I'm trying to get in my Enos flow. And they're like, Enos? And I was like, like Brian Enos, and like,
I've given up asking my students if they know who Brian Enos is.
Like, and then when they're like, who is he? I'm like, well, now he's some dude in the desert smoking peyote, but like,
yeah. Well, that's also the thing I tell him. Like, he came up with a lot of the stuff we teach now. He also smoked way too much pot. You can tell from his book, but it doesn't mean the book isn't valuable.
Totally. He found something there. He was into it. He was onto something. But yeah, there, like you said, it's knowing where it came. Even the fact that, God, was it Jack Weaver that they used to shoot guns with one hand, and then somebody was like, hold on, I think if I put this other mitt on there, it might be onto something. Like,
well, and like here's the other thing too, right? Is we love to kind of, and yes, we have come a long way. Like things have really improved. Because I mean, when Cooper was teaching it originally, 10 seconds on an El Pres was world class. It meant you were a god with a pistol, right? And now there are guys that do it in 3.5.
Yeah.
You know, like we've come so far. But everybody loves to knock the Weaver stance. And as it was commonly taught to law enforcement, they're perfectly correct. But if they ever look at a picture of Jack Weaver doing the Weaver stance, he kind of looks like an IPSC guy.
Does he?
Like from circa early 1990s. Like it doesn't look like what people think.
Yeah.
Right? Because the way he did it wasn't the way everybody taught it.
Sure.
It was like the telephone game.
The lost in translation. That's a thing for sure. Yeah.
So I always find that interesting. Or like, you know my buddy Les Martoni, right? You know Les.
Yeah, pizza something.
Yeah, less pepperoni on the internet.
But yeah.
So Les is a great guy and he's brilliant.
Yeah.
And he's always sending me like his go-to birthday gift for me is like some antique book on pistol craft. Like he sent me McGivern's Fast and Fancy revolver shooting and like, you know, but it's always cool because no matter how much has changed, I still get something out of it.
Yeah.
Like, because like I geek out on this stuff, right? Like performance and kind of the principles of all this. And like I own several treatises on, you know, classical European swordsmanship, right?
I know you're the sword and katana guy.
Right. But what I'm saying is that like I'm never going to carry, even though it's legal in Texas, I don't see myself carrying a longsword, right? It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But you look at these old books from these Italian and German masters of the sword, and there's stuff in there that you'll recognize from books on defensive shooting.
Yeah.
Like the principles are kind of the same, even though the tool you're using is vastly different.
Yes. And see, that was so when I started getting into working more with newer shooters and working with, you know, women and things on just basic fundamental and foundational shooting, I struggled because it is good to know the history, but it's like you said, some people are really into the like, let me tell you about my grandpa's World War II. And I'm not really a gear person. I'm not a gun nerd in that I like the idea of being able to pick anything up in the same foundation fundamentals. You can shoot it probably pretty decent or pretty well. I love that. And that's why I did a season in long range. And I didn't love it as much because it kind of became a gear race. And I'm like, I'm just not as interested in like the nerdy that part of it, right? But I like that it was hard for me because I first got into it. Everybody just wanted to chat guns and gear. I'm like, ugh. But like I very quickly, I'm like, but the foundations and the fundamentals translate to anything that you pick up. And that's why you probably have noticed really good pistol shooters are pretty good long gun shooters. Really good really good long gun shooters usually are not that good at pistol, and for a while they have to work at it harder.
Well, I have a whole theory on that, right? Because even in SF, like people judge you as a shooter by your pistol shooting. Yeah. Even though you're very seldom going to shoot anybody with a pistol in SF. Like, you know, your rifle's your primary, right? But everybody values how well you shoot with a pistol. It's because of that, I think. And nobody really talks about it, but that's kind of, they know that if you can shoot a pistol well, you're going to shoot an M4 really, really well.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, so I shot it was a team sniper match. I got kind of roped into it, but it was super fun. And without saying anything that's going to get me in trouble, there was a team of Navy guys on my squad, and they were fantastic rifle shooters. But there was a side pistol stage, and I remember like, and it was steel. So, you know, steel's the worst. People, every shot, you either hear a ting or you don't. People like, and they all went and shot pistol. I just remember being like, huh. Like, you know, like I was kind of surprised, but I think that that's a thing that some people that are focusing on long guns just don't have enough time behind that pistol. But like you said, I mean, if what's your main platform? And I get that that's where people expend most of their energy.
Well, and pistol's harder, right? Like it just is. Like it's for a variety of reasons, it's harder to do well, especially at speed. And if you can do that, as long as you spend enough time, in my opinion, and we're talking what I like to call urban range. So like anything from, you know, close NCQB to out to about 100 yards or so. Yeah. You know, what you would typically shoot in a city environment, right? Yeah. Because infantry length engagements are a bit different. Like they operate a bit differently. But if you can run a pistol really well, as long as you spend enough time with the rifle to make sure you can manipulate it well, you'll do fine at 100 yards an end. like all day long. You'll do great.
Yeah, I find that when I switched over and did a little bit of PCC, a little bit of two gun, which I don't know if you've shot any two gun. I really enjoy two gun. I'm like, oh, you got rid of the stupid one that I lost my thumbs, tore up my thumbs. I don't know. I get shotgun has its uses, but I'm just like, get rid of the dumb one and let's play with the fun ones that have magazines.
I couldn't agree more. Shotguns
right?
are for hunting birds, opening doors, and hitting jackasses with beanbag rounds.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all they're for. That's all they're for.
Exactly. I was like, shotguns are for the birds. And I was like, no, literally, they're for the birds. Like, let's leave that over there. So
doors. They're good at doors.
And door. Yeah, sure. Doors too. Luckily, I've never had to use that application. But I noticed the biggest thing for me was really just working on that mount and kind of the awkward maneuvering directionally. And then beyond that, everything else was pretty like the pistol skills transferred over. I felt like for, as far as transitioning and vision and everything else, it was all very, very similar.
And for like, say for USPSA, for PCC, like it's the shooting part isn't the hard part at all. Like the shooting part is so easy. It's everything else. It's doing all the manipulations and maneuvering and getting around a left side lean and a barricade. And it's all that stuff. The movement manipulations become the challenge more than the shooting piece.
100%. I will say, after working with some good PCC shooters, and actually one of our really good friends, he just won IDPA nationals for PCC, is having so many rounds. If somebody shoots PCC, I think the number one training tip would be, don't just be squirting bullets, because he's like, I dropped so much time because you have so many rounds that you're just like, oh, and you're just like, I don't know. I just, and that's why a lot of people say 3 guns, sometimes that, 2 on brown anywhere on the target is not always good. So really, going out and calling your shots, which obviously is working on that vision piece of your shooting, but really going out and calling your shots and being intentional about that. He was like, you will actually save a lot of time versus just like, having however many bazillion makeups on a stage.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I can see that for sure. And that's one of those things where quite honestly, I fail as a competitor a lot of the time, because I spent so many years trying to make sure everything was in that fist size group in the high upper chest that I either I push too much and things come off the tracks, or I'm putting everything right by each other in the top half of the A zone and I'm not going fast enough. And one of the things I've always struggled with is finding that middle gear, that middle pace between the two. And I'm getting better at it as I spend more time doing it. I'm a lot better at it than I used to be.
Yeah.
But that was always one of my issues, was I could shoot at like my work pace, or I could just be Tasmanian devil. And I had a hard time actually like being disciplined, but going faster than my work pace. That took a lot of years to figure out for me.
Well, and that's so that's something I find so interesting about training, right? Where I can drop 2 in the A zone as I'm running by, but I'm never going to be a bullseye shooter where those guys that just stack them on for a bazillion rounds at 20 yards. But it's so interesting how people who train that way, how it's different. And so I took a class that was kind of a 50-50 mix of competition shooters and like the guys that kind of follow the more
the B8 stuff kind of.
Yeah, the B8s, but also the guys who really follow like the tactical side of things.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. Gotcha. So like for instance, like I think one of the classes that I took that was with Donovan Moore from Point One Tactics. He's great, but he just started getting into competition not that long ago. And so he had a big following from that side. And it was so interesting how many really, really good stand and shoot shooters there were, guys that can just all day long nail, because that's what they practice, right? They sit there and they practice that. The second you made them just a little bit of dynamic movement around the stage, the wheels really came off. And obviously that came to what they practice. But I think it speaks to your point about the guys that do that as a living, how they need to switch up and vary their training. And you unfortunately, you need to be proficient and good at these different things. But it was also really interesting to me how like when I work with somebody even at a foundational level that's a group shooter, I'm like, you have to get off the idea that all of your shots need to look like this. I'm like, if you leave, and some of them I would be like, if you leave your next training session and you don't have at least a couple in the Charlie, you didn't push yourself. You know what I mean? And then like forcing that people, I'm like, every single time you need to push speed, you need to push distance. And that's where you start adding in those par times for people, you know? And it's like, no matter what, you must meet this par time. And if your shot's like that, so be it this time. That's fine. We'll start to clean it back up. But I feel like you have to, it helps to have a coach sometimes, or just practice buddy, partner, anything to push you outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. And like one of kind of in the same vein, right? Like one of the things I've been working on the last few years is, and I think that this is a concept that not enough people who carry a gun for a living or carry a gun for self-defense think about, right? Because they tend to think about either the way that they're trained institutionally, or they think about that whole inside 7 yards, right? 3 to 5 yards, 3 to 5 rounds, 3 to 5 seconds. But understanding that there are outliers for both environments that aren't the typical, they aren't the median. They're not what you're expecting to get.
Yeah.
And if you build, the term I use for it is a transmission, right? I'm trying to build, and I have for like the last several years now, I've been working really hard on building this transmission in my head with the idea that I want to be able to kind of predetermine exactly what pace I'm going to shoot anything at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and based on a lot of factors, right? Like, so I call it target difficulty and target risk, right? And target difficulty is just how large your optimal scoring zone is and your acceptable scoring zone, whatever that is, like based on the distance to the target, or whether you say, you know, we're shooting full size steel silhouette, so everything on the silhouette is an optimal hit, you know, like whatever, right? Or you're going to dial it down to a B8 or, you know, anything else, right? And then risk is what happens if I miss. So like risk is like a no shoot. So like, as an example, like in USPSA terms, right? So like a hardcover has a minor amount of risk because if I don't realize I put it in the hardcover, I've lost that shot.
Mm-hmm.
But a no shoot over a shoot target has a whole lot more risk because now I have a penalty regardless of whether I realize it and make it up.
Yeah.
Right? Or like the analogy I use a lot for people that don't compete is, you know, if I get in a gunfight with someone who's 7 yards away, and I'm in an industrial area, nobody else lives there. It's the middle of the night, and behind him is a warehouse wall with no windows. It's an easy shot because it's at 7 yards, and I literally have no risk.
Yep.
Because all I have to do is make up the shot if I miss. But then I take the exact same person, the exact same distance from me, but now it's noon, and they're standing on the sidewalk, and behind them is a kindergarten class on the playground at recess.
Right.
I haven't changed the difficulty of the shot, but I've changed the risk, right?
Yeah.
So kind of the idea is I want to be able to modulate all those factors, right? Like change all those variables all the time in training so that I can look at something or react to something if it's the real world and determine exactly how careful I need to be with my sights and how careful I have to be with my trigger and let that determine the pace I take instead of feeling like I've got to go. Because yes, you need to go faster, but you don't want to feel like you have to go faster because then that's when you make the mistakes.
Yeah. So yeah, I totally agree. So it's kind of two things to that. So first of all, Mason Lane has a really good drill called Finding 100.
Yeah, I've seen it on YouTube. I've never trained with him. I like his stuff a lot on YouTube.
Yeah,
It's a great drill.
Yeah, I know I keep like name dropping because I don't want to not give somebody credit for a lot of these things that I've learned. And so it's a great drill. Yeah, because it's basically like, hey, what's my 100? Like, and like 100 plus where like the wheels are falling off. And so you're kind of setting up some different targets at different difficulties. And you just want to like, what is my absolute hammer down and what can I do at that pace? You know, there was a couple runs I did on it when he was teaching and he was like, that's not your 100. He was like, you just nailed that 3 times in a row. That's not your 100. So like you said, for somebody who needs to be pushed, like, hey, go a little faster, doesn't mean, then you kind of, and then you figure out like, okay, if that's your 100 and now the wheels are kind of like, I can't nail that every time. Do I dial my match pace back down to 90 or 80, or does it depend on that stage or that target presentation or what I'm doing? And it's exactly like you said, where you're weighing out, you know, risk versus knowing what you can do. And when I do my own training, I've really realized that when I'm training, I kind of dissect my training into almost, the intention of it into 3 different parts. It's either I'm diagnosing something, I'm analyzing something, or I'm refining something. So if something's happening and I don't know why, I'm maybe going to set up a drill where I'm just paying attention to one piece until I figure out why am I doing that or why am I getting this result. And then maybe I'm doing something else where I'm analyzing what's my 100? Where do I based on this target presentation, what pace can I really shoot that at what distance and still get my A zone hit? So I'm analyzing that way. And then I'm refining where I'm trying to improve it and build that in. So it's like I kind of almost set up my training for myself like that whenever I'm doing a drill with a focus of one of those things.
Yeah. So like the concepts I use are for those that you just named are experimentation and isolation.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I add in combination and validation, right? So like combination is you're not working on any one skill. You're doing the Eric Greffel type stuff where it's long courses of fire and it's all kind of a little bit random. And you're seeing how consistent you can be. So you're not trying to set any personal records. You're also not trying to shoot lazy.
Yeah.
You're trying to find that magic percentage where this is where I can be consistent no matter how complex a series of tasks is and what I've been given and how little, how not well I know this pattern, right? How this pattern is like something that I haven't really done, at least in the last few reps. And then validation is just testing. So it's like just, that whole test retest thing of, okay, I did all this stuff. Now did I get better?
Right.
Did it work? Yeah.
And God, Eric is such a freaking machine. I have quite a few friends who've taken his class. And what I find interesting, and I know people very frequently say there's no advanced concepts in shooting. And I'm like, I get that to a degree, but there's definitely an advanced methodology to performance where Eric will say that he's actually, because a lot of people are like, get your stage plan on your head. Once the buzzer goes off, you're done thinking. You're just executing. Eric's thinking the whole time. He's like doing math in his head. Yeah. So for him, shooting is in the background. And he says that, right? Like where he has these long, complex drills because the fundamentals of shooting, he's no longer thinking about where's my dot, where's my grip, it's like that is so ingrained, that's in the background. And now he's doing math as shooting.
Well, first off, he's a freak of nature for one thing. But and I've never trained with him, but there's very few instructors I still like have on my wish list. I've trained with a lot of people. Yeah. And I think Eric Greffel is probably at the top of the wish list.
Right. Everybody I've talked to, like you'll feel real bad about yourself, but like I'd be looking forward to it. But yeah.
So what I think, like my personal theory on this, because I came up with those terms, like I invented the terms, but I didn't invent the concepts, right? Yeah. I did it when I was reading about, coaching methodology and sports performance and sports psychology and all that stuff, trying to figure out all these things. And that whole like isolation versus combination thing, like everybody does isolation and everybody does the test, whether you're a competitive shooter or you're a military guy or a law enforcement guy. But a lot of guys don't do the combination work. And that's why they fall apart on the test, because the test is very seldom one skill. It's a combination of skills. And when you stack those tasks, you start increasing your rate of error and lowering your performance on each task unless you train that stuff, right? So I think my personal theory on this, using my terms, which I'm sure are not the terms Eric Greffel uses, is that he no longer needs the isolation drills. Like he's maxed out. Like he's not going to get any better on the draw or on the reload or on his target transitions or on his trigger press. Like he's been doing it at such a high level for so long, at such a high volume of training, that there's no more juice left in the squeeze for him on that. Like he just needs to be, not that he's not inhumanly consistent already, but that's the only place he can still improve, I think.
He gets to a stage and he figures out what the ideal hit factor is on that stage. He literally does the math of how many targets. He walks through it and figures out how long it should take. Then he does the math. Is this a 5 hit factor stage? Is this a 9 hit factor stage? Yep. And then based on that, he goes, okay, in order to do really well on this stage, I need to hit no more than 10% Charlies or and then he decides how aggressive he's going to be based on that. So he's at a point where it is all strategy, you know what I mean? And he will even, I have heard this anecdotally, so put whatever stock in it you want, but he will even purposely leave a little bit on the table and let people get within 5% of him till the very end of the match to try to goad those people into like swinging for the fences.
Oh, I believe it. I completely believe it. Yeah.
He can dial his performance into that level.
So if you watch his practice videos, right? Well, first off, it'll make you want to rage quit the sport. But if you watch his practice videos, you realize how much he's leaving in the tank when he wins world championships. Like it's
consistent.
When he goes all out in practice, you're just like, because you don't see it when he shoots matches, because he's leaving, even at his biggest push, he's still leaving a bit in the tank.
Yeah. I did some training with a really good Argentinian shooter, and we shot the drill and I was going to go down and check it. And he's, oh, Krystal, no. Like, and it's minimum 3 times. You had to shoot the drill 3 times. And if you failed in any one of those times, it doesn't matter. And it was just about the consistency. And I was like, well, that's crazy. But yeah.
No, see, I like that. Lately, I've been trying to grade things in a group of reps, like grade per set, not per rep. You know, look for patterns on the targets, look for patterns in my performance over 3 to 5 reps instead of each individual rep, and kind of try to figure that out.
Exactly.
So tell me real quick, are you still doing the Turning Point stuff? Is that still going on?
Yeah, I just got back from Dallas. I was there for the Young Women's Leadership Summit down in Dallas for Turning Point.
I thought you'd said that. So tell us about that a little bit for a second.
Trying to save America's youth, baby. I got involved with them because of my passion about the Second Amendment, and to be honest, that is actually why I do everything I do in the shooting industry and why I do everything in the shooting sports. My genuine feeling is that people don't care about rights that they don't use. So whatever I can do to make the Second Amendment part of somebody's life, to where it's part of something that they do daily with their family, whether they do competition, whether they do whatever, like that is actually you found me out. That's my hidden agenda, is to make the Second Amendment part of people's life, make it a family thing, because that's how I grew up. And that's why it's important to me, is I grew up shooting with my family and my dad. And so that was part of, Turning Point, is obviously that's one thing that they care about in kind of the conservative movement. So I work with them, whenever I can. I gave a talk at the University of Minnesota about the importance of the Second Amendment. My grandmother came from a communist country, and she escaped all kinds of wars and this, that, and the other thing, or didn't escape in some situations. And so I think that that's why it's important. And I think you will only preserve the Second Amendment if you actually make it a part of the culture.
Yep. One of the most rewarding things I've done professionally in the last few years is I was the expert witness I wasn't the only expert witness, but from the judge's ruling, it sounds like I was the one that kind of sealed the deal on overturning the Illinois gun ban.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the one that's going up at the Supreme Court right now. Yeah.
Man.
So they hired me as an expert witness. And like I said, I wasn't the only expert witness, but my stuff was all over the judge's statement. So that made me feel pretty good.
Yeah. It's huge. And especially now that I've traveled, the world into different things. Like I've shot match in Australia, things like that. And it's just, it's reminding people that yes, there's dangers as with everything, but I'm like, you understand, like as a girl, it is literally the only thing that's going to give me any sort of equal chance or equal footing with, a threat that would be bigger than me. So,
well, that's something I've never understood, is you would think that, let me choose the right terms for this before I have the entire internet trying to lynch me.
There's no nuance.
Yeah, no nuance. No, it's either black or white.
Yeah.
But you would think that the feminist movement would be embracing the Second Amendment more, wouldn't you?
Yeah. You would think.
You would think so. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
All right. So real quick before we wrap up, let everybody know what you have, like your hands in so many pies. So let everybody know what your businesses are, what your classes are, how to get a hold of you, how to find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I do keep my beauty business, my salon. I do actually keep it separate because it's Minnesota. But I have been known to fix a pair of guy brows. It'll improve your peripheral vision. It'll improve your shooting. So let's tame those suckers up. But yeah, so really just Krystal.Dunn with a K. Krystal.Dunn on Instagram is where I kind of put most of my flow points, the other things I do. I'm starting to put more content on YouTube because, again, not only does the internet have no nuance, it has no attention span. So anything that has any sort of like legitimate substance that I'm trying to bring kind of just some education. Really, my goal would be, I have noticed how many average gun owners out there are like the gun person in their circle, and somebody comes to them for help and information. And a lot of times their level of education is not very good. So I really want to try to put out enough education information to help raise the bar for the average gun owner, that they could be a better resource to people in their family and keep spreading that Second Amendment. So again, that's my ultimate goal.
Well, I'm definitely with you on that one. So it was great catching up with you.
Yeah.
It absolutely was. You need to come down to Texas and come visit us. Come hang out. We've got room in the house. We'll go shoot a match. We'll go eat. I live in the barbecue capital of Texas. By state decree.
Are
it's
you
actually
serious?
a law. So
my dad has literally been trying to convince my mom to go on like a country, like a road trip up the whole country, like based on barbecue joints. So that's big in my family.
Yeah, you need to come down here for sure then.
For sure.
All right. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed my chat with Krystal as much as I did. It was great catching up with an old friend. Seriously though, if you're looking for any sort of firearms instruction or public speaking, media stuff, definitely seek her out because she's very good at that. She's interviewed me a couple times actually for TTPOA and I think maybe something else. So
I'm a maybe something with Prairie Fire, but I'm a general all around media personality at events and things like that. And I like to enjoy and sit and have chats with people just like you do. It's a good time getting to talk to some wonderful folks in the gun industry.
And we'll definitely seek her out for that as well. And hope everybody had a good time, and I will talk to everyone later.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.